They say curiosity killed the cat, but in horror movies, it kills everyone. Imagine being chased down a deserted highway, the echo of a truck engine behind you, and still deciding to turn back, just to check something. Imagine holding your ticket to salvation, a cursed object wrapped in paper, and never bothering to open it. Again and again, across decades of terror, the victims of horror aren't slain by monsters alone. They are murdered by their own stupidity. Tonight, we dig deep into the rotten core of human decision-making, where logic goes to die and panic takes control. From those who peek down dark pipes to the ones who unmask killers with trembling hands, each story reminds us of one terrifying truth. Fear doesn't kill you, your choices do. Welcome to Midnight Hauntings, where we relive the dumbest, bloodiest, and most tragic decisions in horror history. Turn off the lights, grip your seat, and hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to see will make you scream, not in terror, but in disbelief. Every horror story begins with a choice. Sometimes it's a decision born out of fear, other times out of arrogance, but the most dangerous one of all is curiosity. It's the same impulse that makes us open doors we should leave shut, follow footprints that lead into the woods, or turn back when survival demands we keep driving. And in the twisted world of horror movies, curiosity doesn't just kill the cat, it annihilates anyone foolish enough to listen to it. Take Jeepers Creepers, for instance. After being chased down a lonely highway by a rusted, monstrous truck that seems driven by pure malice, Darry and Trish should have sped toward the nearest police station and never looked back. But when they spot that same sinister driver dumping a human-shaped bundle into a pipe, logic leaves the car along with their common sense. Against all reason, Darry insists on checking the pipe, as if proving his bravery could undo the nightmare they've stumbled into. He climbs down into the darkness, the smell of decay thick in the air, rats scratching in the shadows. What he finds is something worse than death. A glimpse into the feeding grounds of a creature that doesn't just kill but collects. One reckless decision, and the hunter now knows his prey by name. Curiosity transforms into doom again and drag me to hell. Christine, haunted by a curse that condemns her to eternal damnation, believes she's finally found a way to reverse her fate. All she needs to do is pass on the cursed button that seals her fate in hell. She prepares, desperate and shaking, sealing the object in an envelope. But, in a cruel twist of carelessness, she mixes up the envelopes. When she and her boyfriend Clay later discover the mistake, it's already too late. The cursed button still belongs to her. One quick check could have saved her soul, but horror thrives on what-ifs. The smallest oversight becomes a death sentence, and Christine's descent into hell is sealed by her own blindness. Then there's Robert Neville in I Am Legend, a man fighting to save humanity in a world devoured by darkness. When the infected swarm his lab, Neville chooses self-sacrifice, placing the cure in Anna's hands and locking her and her son in a reinforced room. He pulls the pin from a grenade and charges at the monsters, a martyr to science and salvation. But the cruel irony of horror lies in alternatives. Neville could have easily thrown the grenade and jumped into safety himself. There was room for one more. There always is. But in his moment of desperation, reason vanishes. He dies a hero, yes, but a preventable one. Horror films often thrive on this tragic logic. Noble intentions executed through foolish means. The same pattern echoes across these stories, humans compelled to act when stillness could save them. Horror understands that curiosity is both our greatest strength and our most fatal weakness. The need to know, to see, to understand, to confront drives every doomed protagonist toward their end. It's a mirror held up to our own instincts. We watch these characters make their fatal mistakes, shaking our heads and muttering, "Don't go back," even though deep down, we know we might do the same. What makes these scenes terrifying isn't just the blood or the monsters, it's the recognition. Every viewer has felt that pull of curiosity in real life, the urge to peek at something strange on a dark road, to open a door when we hear a noise we shouldn't investigate. The horror genre amplifies that impulse until it becomes deadly. It's not the supernatural that kills, it's the simple, human compulsion to know more than we should. In each of these stories, the audience becomes an unwilling accomplice. We want Darry to check the pipe because we want to see what's inside. We want Christine to open the envelope to confirm whether the curse is truly gone, We want Neville to stand his ground, to face the monsters head on. Horror movies are a dance between our rational mind and our morbid fascination. We scold the characters, but we crave their mistakes because without them, there would be no story. Curiosity, in the realm of horror, is the ultimate bait. It promises understanding, but delivers only terror. And that's the cruel truth behind every scream. Sometimes survival demands ignorance. But human beings are terrible at leaving mysteries unsolved. We want to see what's hiding in the dark, even if it means never coming back out. So, the next time you find yourself alone on a quiet road, watching something strange unfold in the distance, remember Darry, Christine, and Neville. Remember the way curiosity whispers in your ear, telling you to take just one more look. That whisper might sound harmless, but in the world of horror, it's the voice of death itself. Fear is supposed to protect us. It's the ancient instinct that tells us to run, hide, or fight when danger looms. But in horror films, fear doesn't save anyone. It paralyzes them, twists their thoughts, and drags them straight into the killer's grasp. Terror doesn't need claws or fangs when panic does the work for it. In I Know What You Did Last Summer, Helen is so close to freedom, she can almost taste it. She's sprinting through the dark streets, her lungs burning, footsteps echoing behind her as the killer stalks her through alleys. The night bursts with sound sirens, shouts, the distant cheer of a marching band. Just a few more steps and she'll be safe in the light, surrounded by people who could help her. But that's when fear whispers the fatal question, what if he's right behind you? She turns. For a split second, the world slows, her hair whipping around as she glances back into the dark. That hesitation, just one heartbeat too long, is all the killer needs. The hook flashes, the shadows move, and Helen's scream drowns beneath the music of the parade. It's one of horror's most painful deaths, not because of brutality, but because of how close she was. Fear didn't chase her down, it made her stop. Then there's Saw 2, where panic devours reason like acid. Inside a trap built by the sadistic engineer Jigsaw, Addison faces a box suspended in the middle of a room containing a life-saving antidote. She's infected, desperate, and the clock is ticking. Through the haze of terror, she sees 2 holes cut into the glass. No time to think, no time to question. She thrusts both arms inside and the blade snaps shut, locking her in her own blood. Had she taken 1 second to look around, she would have noticed the lock on the other side of the box. The key that could have saved her was right there, glinting in the dim light, waiting for calm eyes to see it. But fear doesn't let you think. Fear is a storm inside the skull, flooding every rational thought until all that's left is survive, survive, survive. And in that primal state, survival becomes self-destruction. These scenes reveal something brutally honest about human nature. Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a weapon. It narrows our focus until we see only what's in front of us, stripping away logic, perspective, and sometimes hope itself. The victims in these stories didn't die because they were weak. They died because fear made them forget how to be human. It's easy for us, watching safely from our couches, to shout, "Don't stop, don't go that way." But that's the luxury of distance. In real life, fear can be just as blinding. Imagine waking up to strange noises in your house, or sensing someone following you down a dark street. Every sound becomes an alarm, every shadow a threat. You move faster, heart hammering, and suddenly you're no longer thinking, you're reacting. Horror movies amplify that experience until it becomes unbearable. The brilliance of Saw 2 lies in how it captures the psychology of panic. Addison isn't dumb, she's terrified. The box becomes a metaphor for every desperate decision made under pressure, a choice that feels right in the moment but guarantees suffering. The glass gleams like salvation, and in that frenzy she sees no danger, only hope. That's the twisted genius of fear. It disguises itself as clarity. Helen's death, on the other hand, is all about the tyranny of instinct. Evolution teaches us to check behind us, to confirm the threat. But the human brain hasn't evolved for serial killers and cinematic timing. It's programmed for predators in the wild, where glancing back could mean survival. Horror takes that instinct and turns it against us. The moment Helen obeys it, she signs her death warrant. The psychology behind these choices is called the freeze response, part of our fight, flight, or freeze survival system. When danger feels overwhelming, the brain floods with chemicals that paralyze action. The body hesitates, hoping the threat passes. In animals, freezing can save lives. In humans and in horror movies, it gets you killed. That's why horror films resonate so deeply. They reveal that fear isn't an external monster. It lives inside us. The killers, the traps, the haunted houses are only mirrors reflecting what happens when our minds betray us. Every scream on screen is a reminder that logic is fragile, and under pressure, even the smartest person can make the dumbest choice imaginable. Think of the moments when you've panicked, losing your keys, realizing your child has wandered off, hearing a strange sound in the dark. For a second, time stretches. Every possible action collapses into a blur of chaos. That's fear doing its work. Now imagine that panic amplified 100-fold, surrounded by death, blood, and shadows. That's where Helen and Addison lived their final seconds. In the end, their deaths aren't about stupidity, they're about humanity. Fear makes fools of us all. It's a universal language that doesn't care about logic, intelligence, or experience. It strips everything away until we're just trembling creatures trying to make sense of the dark.
Did you see that?
Horror, at its best, holds a mirror to that truth. It asks, what would you do? And forces us to confront the uncomfortable answer. Probably the same thing. We'd look back. We'd act rashly. We'd freeze. Because fear doesn't just cloud the mind, it erases it. And that's what makes these moments unforgettable. Not the blood, not the screams, but the sheer, haunting recognition that the line between victim and survivor is thinner than a heartbeat, and fear decides which side we land on. In horror, evil rarely needs to knock. It's often invited in. Sometimes the monster wears a mask, sometimes a smile, and sometimes it hides behind a dollar sign. Greed, compassion, and pride are the perfect ingredients for disaster. When combined with denial, they turn ordinary people into architects of their own doom. Few stories capture this, better than Jaws. The small seaside town of Amity Island depends on tourists to survive. The mayor, a man who sees the world through profit margins, faces a choice between safety and money. After reports of a giant great white shark killing swimmers near the beach, every sane voice urges him to close it down. But greed doesn't listen. It negotiates. We depend on the summer people for our very lives, he argues, his smile tight, his eyes hiding the fear of losing revenue. The logic is chilling. Better to risk lives than to lose income. So, the beaches stay open, families laugh, children play, and beneath the waves, the ocean hides something ancient and hungry. The result is inevitable. Screams replace laughter, the water turns red, and Amity Island learns the cost of denial too late. The mayor's decision isn't just dumb, it's human. It's what happens when self-interest blinds morality. In horror, greed is never punished immediately. It waits, lets arrogance grow fat, then devours it whole. A different kind of foolishness drives the chaos in the purge. In this world, for one night each year, all crime, including murder, is legal. It's the ultimate social experiment, a grotesque release valve for humanity's darkness. The Sandin family, wealthy and protected, lock themselves in their fortified home, believing their walls and money can keep evil out. But evil doesn't always break in, it can be invited. Charlie, the young son, hears desperate pleas from a stranger outside. The man is injured, begging for help, hunted by masked killers. Compassion, that most human of instincts, ignites in Charlie's heart. Without understanding the cost, he disables the security system and lets the stranger in. The moment the locks disengage, the line between safety and slaughter dissolves. That single act of kindness unleashes chaos. The pursuers surround the house, demanding their prey back. What follows is a nightmare of violence and betrayal. The family flees. Their safe room, the one place designed to keep them alive, and splits up, convinced they can outsmart death by scattering. They become easy targets, isolated and terrified. The irony burns. Their downfall begins not with cruelty, but with mercy. In the real world, compassion saves lives. In horror, it's often punished brutally. But this cruelty reveals something profound about the genre. It doesn't hate kindness. It warns that empathy, when mixed with naivety, can be fatal. The Purge reminds us that even the purest intentions can summon hell if we don't respect the darkness we're facing. Both Jaws and The Purge expose how human weakness feeds horror. Greed blinds, compassion misfires, and denial binds us to the inevitable. The monsters in these films, whether shark or masked killer, are almost secondary. The true horror lies in watching people make decisions they believe are right, only to realize they've sealed their own fate. There's something disturbingly relatable about Mayor Vaughan's decision. We've all seen versions of it in real life, companies hiding dangers to protect profits, leaders ignoring threats for public image, individuals pretending the problem isn't real because the truth is inconvenient. Horror simply strips away the pretense and leaves the moral bones exposed. The shark isn't just an animal, it's the consequence of greed, made flesh. Meanwhile, Charlie's act of mercy mirrors another familiar tragedy, the belief that we can control chaos. Horror punishes that arrogance. The Sandines house, filled with surveillance screens and reinforced steel, is a fortress built on denial. They think they've bought safety, but the moment they forget fear's value, they lose everything. The walls don't fall because they're weak. They fall because the family stopped believing they could break. In both stories, the audience feels trapped in the same moral dilemma. Would you close the beach and risk your town's survival? Would you open the door to a dying man, knowing he could be dangerous? Horror thrives in that uncertainty. It forces us to confront the dark complexity of morality, how easily right and wrong blur when survival and conscience collide. That's what makes greed and foolish kindness so potent in this genre. They aren't external villains, they're inside us. They whisper justifications, twist compassion into recklessness, and turn rationality into ruin. A character doesn't wake up thinking, I'll make the worst decision of my life today. They believe they're doing the sensible, moral, or profitable thing. The tragedy is that horror always knows better. In The Purge, when the Sandins finally realize the stranger they saved is the only person capable of protecting them, the message crystallizes. Horror doesn't condemn kindness, it demands awareness. To survive the darkness, you must first recognize it. And in Jaws, when the survivors finally hunt the shark, it's not just a battle against nature, it's penance. Every strike against the beast is a confession for every life lost to greed. The ocean, vast and unforgiving, becomes the ultimate judge. Greed and misguided compassion are two sides of the same doomed coin. One says, I deserve everything. The other says, everyone deserves everything. Both forget the oldest rule of horror. The world doesn't care about what you deserve. It only answers to consequence. So the next time you see someone ignore a warning sign or unlock a door because it's the right thing to do, remember, the monsters aren't waiting outside. They're already inside, hidden behind our good intentions and selfish dreams. Horror merely shines a flashlight on them, reminding us that sometimes survival means being cruelly, brutally rational. By the final act of most horror movies, the rules are clear. Don't split up, don't touch anything suspicious, and never, ever believe it's over. Yet, again and again, survivors sabotage themselves in the final stretch, as if the will to survive is tangled with the urge to self-destruct. The closer they get to safety, the more reckless they become. In the end, the monster doesn't have to kill them, they do it for him. Nowhere is that clearer than in Halloween, Resurrection. Laurie Strode has spent her life haunted by one man, the unstoppable killer, Michael Myers. She has prepared for him, fought him, outsmarted him. When she finally catches him dangling helplessly from a rooftop, she has every reason to finish it. One swing of the blade, and her decades-long nightmare ends. But fear doesn't just paralyze, it deceives. She hesitates, decides she must make sure it's really him under the mask. As she reaches forward to remove it, Myers strikes, pulling her to her death. That hesitation, that tiny flicker of doubt, is what horror feeds on. Laurie, the ultimate survivor, undone, not by strength or weakness, but by compassion, a need for certainty in an uncertain world. The lesson is cruel but simple. In horror, trust kills. Then there's Scream, where Tatum's death is the perfect blend of irony and stupidity. Trapped in a garage by the masked killer Ghostface, she actually puts up a fight. She hurls bottles, dodges attacks, even knocks the killer down. She could run, she could grab a weapon. She could win. Instead, she makes a choice so absurd, it almost feels like a dare. She tries to crawl through the tiny pet door of the automatic garage door. It's a moment burned into horror history, not for its gore, but for its absurdity. As the door rises, lifting her by the ribs, the audience can't decide whether to scream or laugh. It's the perfect example of how terror and idiocy coexist in the genre's DNA. But beneath the surface, Tatum's death reveals something deeper. Panic creates tunnel vision. She doesn't think of the front door, the window, the phone. Her mind locks onto the most obvious, visible escape, a hole, barely big enough for a dog. In that sense, she's not stupid. She's desperate, and desperation, as horror never tires of proving, makes people do impossible, fatal things. The same tragic logic drives Dr. Lawrence Gordon in Saw. Trapped in a grimy bathroom, chained by the ankle, he's been given an impossible task: kill his cellmate or die. After hours of psychological torment, he decides to take the saw meant for cutting metal and, instead, cuts through his own leg to reach the phone lying just beyond his grasp. It's one of the most infamous scenes in horror history, because it distills the genre's purest idea. Survival is rarely rational, but the cruel twist, he didn't have to do it. He could have used the saw to pull the phone closer, a simple, logical action overlooked in the haze of hopelessness. Yet, in that moment, logic doesn't exist. Pain, fear, and exhaustion create a new kind of reasoning, one ruled entirely by instinct. The brilliance of Saw lies in its portrayal of how human intellect crumbles under terror. The characters aren't idiots, they're reflections of how fragile reason truly is. Each of these moments feels absurd in hindsight. Audiences watch, shouting at the screen, "Don't do it, don't look, don't crawl through that door." But that's the trap horror sets for us. We believe we'd be smarter, braver, more composed. We forget that survival is rarely cinematic, it's messy, irrational, and driven by panic. In the real world, people make the same mistakes. They run upstairs instead of outside. They go back for sentimental objects. They stop to check if the danger is really gone. The line between fiction and reality blurs, and horror thrives in that blurred space. What unites Laurie, Tatum, and Gordon is the illusion of control. They believe, for a fleeting second, that they can reclaim it. Laurie believes she can look death in the face and verify its identity. Tatum believes she can slip through an impossible exit. Gordon believes that suffering is the only path to freedom. Each act is a declaration of will, but also of delusion. In trying to conquer fear, they handed victory. Horror is obsessed with the collapse of control. The survivor's journey is never about beating the monster. It's about realizing that survival requires surrender. You don't conquer the darkness. You adapt to it. You learn when to act and when to run, when to trust your instincts and when to silence them. The ones who die are those who cling to certainty in a world designed to destroy it. There's a strange beauty in their destruction. Laurie's fall isn't just death, it's release. Her decades of obsession end not in triumph, but in acceptance. Tatum's brutal, almost comic demise reminds us that fear doesn't discriminate between intelligence and folly. And Gordon's self-mutilation is both grotesque and profound, a man cutting away the illusion of control, piece by piece. Horror thrives because it exposes that truth we all avoid. The greatest danger is not what hunts us, but what lives inside us. We are the unreliable narrators of our own survival stories. We overthink, we hesitate, we act on impulse. Monsters exploit that. They don't need to be faster or stronger, just patient. By the time the final survivor faces the last horror, they've already lost something essential: trust in their own mind. Horror isn't about death, it's about the slow unraveling of logic until every choice feels like a trap. And when the survivor finally falls, the audience feels a grim satisfaction. Not because they deserved it, but because it feels inevitable. So when you next find yourself shouting at the screen, remember Laurie on the rooftop, Tatum in the garage, and Gordon in the bathroom. Remember how close they were to freedom and how quickly the mind can turn against itself. In the quiet after the final scream, Horror whispers its cruelest truth. Sometimes survival isn't about outsmarting the killer. It's about outsmarting yourself. When you strip away the screams, the shadows, and the monsters, horror movies are really about choices. Every doomed character, every victim swallowed by darkness, was once just a person trying to make sense of chaos. They made a choice, often small and stupid, but in a world ruled by fear, small mistakes become fatal. From Jeepers Creepers to Saw, from the beaches of Jaws to the burning home in The Purge, these stories all share a single truth. Evil doesn't always hunt us down. Sometimes we walk straight into its arms. Curiosity, panic, greed, compassion, these are human instincts, not crimes. But in the twisted logic of horror, instincts can turn traitorous. They cloud judgment, whisper lies, and convince us that reason is optional when death is near. The characters we mock for being dumb are mirrors, reflecting the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. Would you really keep driving if you saw something suspicious on the road? Would you ignore a plea for help on your doorstep? Would you think clearly after hours trapped in fear, knowing your life depended on a single decision? Horror reminds us that logic is fragile and that in the dark, our minds are not as trustworthy as we believe. But these stories aren't just cautionary tales, they're survival manuals in disguise. Each one teaches a lesson about control, awareness, and trust. Jeepers Creepers warns us not to let curiosity outrun caution. Drag Me to Hell reminds us that small mistakes matter. The Purge and Jaws expose the cost of denial, how greed and misplaced mercy can unleash hell. And Saw reveals the brutal truth about fear. When panic takes over, intelligence dies. The real monsters in horror movies aren't supernatural, they're psychological. They live in hesitation, arrogance, blind faith, and desperation. The moment we stop thinking critically, the horror begins. That's what makes these stories resonate. They're not fantasy. They're reflections of reality distorted, just enough to make us uncomfortable. In life, horror doesn't announce itself with violins or thunderclaps. It creeps in quietly through distraction, denial, or emotion. But unlike the victims on screen, we have a chance to pause, to breathe, to think. If there's a lesson to take from every gruesome mistake in horror history, it's this: awareness is survival. So, the next time fear grips you, remember the faces of those who didn't make it out. Remember how curiosity, greed, or kindness turned fatal. Keep your head clear, your senses sharp, and your reason louder than your heartbeat. Because when darkness comes, and it always does, it won't be claws or blades that decide your fate. It'll be your choices. And in the world of midnight hauntings, we've seen exactly what happens when you choose wrong.